Welcome back to the Glam Chemist. I'm your host, Genesis Velasquez, and today we are doing a solo episode just because there's been a lot of things on my mind, as many of us in the States have been experiencing a lot of changes and seeing all the violence in our streets and just trying to cope with how to go about normalcy in this time. And I've been sitting on this episode for a while. I couldn't really bring myself to outline anything. I wrote a couple of notes of what I wanted to discuss, but there's really no tidying up this conversation. So I'm just going to sit here and talk to you guys and be honest about how I'm feeling and do my best to share information that might be helpful. So this episode's not going to include a guest or it's not going to be polished. It's going to be very honest. There's a weight to this moment. If you're listening to this in the United States right now, you can feel it. There's a lot of tension in the air, a kind of low hum of anxiety from our phone screens to our morning commute to having to write our emails and sitting in our offices. The news cycle is feeling very relentless and it's feeling very heavy and it's feeling unavoidable because every time you engage in any content, you're just shown these violent images that we are all experiencing. Every headline just feels like a warning bell, too, because if you're aware of the historical pattern recognition that we can see in this administration, it's hard to be a person who is engaged and hard to be a person who is knowledgeable. Lately, I've just been asking myself, how are we supposed to go on with business as usual when like the ground feels like it's shifting underneath us, when everything just feels very volatile? And I'm sure I'm not the only one. And pretending otherwise is just starting to feel heavier than just saying it out loud. I was hoping to have this solo episode where I shared good news with you guys and I was able to tell you that I'm starting a new job and I'm going to be reintroducing myself into the corporate world. And to be honest, on paper, that seems very exciting. But given the current circumstances, there's a lot to think about and there's a lot more on my mind than just this wonderful milestone and this thing that I've been, trying so hard to participate in and bring myself back into. Emotionally, it's feeling really complicated because stepping back into the corporate life right now just feels a little bit surreal. Showing up to meetings and like dealing with emails and talking about timelines and deliverables, acting like everything is neutral or like we're in a different time zone. I cannot shake how I feel about the current circumstances of our country, and I cannot pretend that it's not affecting me in some way. Because the reality is that everything we do has to do with some sort of politics, and it's unavoidable. And being in the STEM industry, even more so because it's being attacked on a daily basis by this administration. Here's something that I want to say very clearly. We all know that science is not neutral, and more than that, science right now is essential. And we're actively watching people deny it in real time. And it's been happening for years. We're watching researchers lose their funding and grants because their work is deemed inconvenient or politically undesirable. We're watching entire fields be questioned and eliminated in some situations just based on no evidence at all. And it's basically based on whether or not it aligns with someone's ideology, which has nothing to do with its validity. We're watching scientists be discredited and silenced and painted as like untrustworthy simply because they're doing their jobs. In a moment like this, science becomes one of the last lines of defense against fear based narratives. Watching science be invalidated right in front of our eyes is destabilizing to me, and I'm sure that a lot of you can relate. It's eroding public trust and it's creating confusion in spaces that we used to have clarity and we used to have understanding. It's leaving a lot of communities vulnerable. When science is weakened or dismissed or bent to fit an agenda, it shows in healthcare outcomes, in environmental exposure, in reproductive autonomy, in public health. And it's really testing and seeing whose lives are deemed worth protecting. And in beauty, we see it in whose skin is considered standard, whose hair is considered professional, whose bodies are considered marketable and aspirational. If you think that you can separate your work from what's happening in the world and what's happening in our country, You're incredibly privileged to think so because right now it's not a luxury that anyone has. This is too close to home for us to be silent and not use our voices and our platforms to say something. A lot of the words that I'm trying to say aren't coming to me in the way that I would like because there's a lot of fear behind it. Fear of jeopardizing any opportunities that I might have, fear of being told to stick to beauty and stick to chemistry and stick to conversations and not discuss politics. I want this podcast to become a place where I can tell the truth without having to translate it to somebody to be palatable. I want it to be a place to say, hey, this is what's happening. We're not imagining it. I refuse to be gaslit into thinking that this isn't what's really happening in these streets and what's happening in the world. And it's going to take community, and it's going to take us speaking up, and it's going to take us looking to our neighbors and connecting and organizing to do something about this. This podcast was always meant to be a space for conversations, and I'm talking about real conversations with scientists, formulators, researchers, engineers, and people working at the intersection of beauty, science, and public life. And right now, having those conversations feels a little bit harder, but it's far more necessary than ever. Because when science is being attacked or invalidated and deliberately misunderstood, it changes the context of everything we're talking about. It changes how we show up to work. It changes at what cost it is to be honest. It changes the emotional weight of what we're simply doing in our jobs every day. And I talk to scientists who are exhausted. And let's be frank, feels thankless most times and even feels risky at this time to pursue. But this platform is going to continue to highlight those voices. And honestly, even more so now, I'm going to reach out to more people that are in more niche industries that we can learn from and taking on the responsibility and the gravity of the work that we need to take during this time. Because the work we do matters. The education we pursue matters. And the questions we ask and insist on asking matter. But the silence can't be neutral either. And lately, staying quiet has been feeling like a form of compliance. Like I feel like I haven't been able to face myself for not standing up for something that I know that I have a position and a place to put it. And I need to speak up because holding all of this inside is starting to feel like a betrayal to myself and to my values and to the reason why I fell in love with science in the first place. Our American politics has always decided what gets studied, what gets funded, and what gets protected by regulation, and who it excludes, and who it harms, and what it erases. And to think that those two are not connected is frankly naive of any of us. And if we're honest, in beauty, it's the same thing. You can't separate it from political ideals that we've had in the past. We've seen what they deem the standard. We've seen what they deem professional. We've seen what they market and become aspirational towards. And we see which consumers are an afterthought based on, let's be frank, the color of their skin, their type of hair, their communities. To pretend that we can separate our work from the world that we're living in is a privilege. And right now, I don't have that luxury, and many people don't. I want this podcast to be a place where we can name the weight together, where science isn't stripped of its humanity, where curiosity and care are treated as strengths and not liabilities. If the world is going to question science, then this space will continue to defend it by centering the people doing the work, telling the truth about what this moment asks of us, and refusing to pretend that it is in any way light or easy. I want to be honest. I don't have this mapped out. I don't wake up every morning thinking exactly where I'm going to put my energy or what's the right thing to do. And a lot of the time, I'm feeling overwhelmed and unsure. And frankly, I'm afraid of doing too little or doing it wrong. But I'm learning that waiting for the perfect moment and waiting for perfect clarity is never going to happen. So getting involved doesn't start with certainty. It's going to start with a little bit of care. And that's what I intend to put forward with this platform. So for me, that means beginning where I am. We're learning who's already doing the work. We're supporting organizations like Indivisible, and we're helping people organize locally. We're going to show up for our communities, and we're going to push back against policies that are rooted in harm and exclusion. And it means remembering that change doesn't happen in a sweeping national moment. It happens in conversations, in local actions, and choosing not to disengage, even though we feel uncomfortable and lonely. If you're listening to this and you feel some sort of paralysis, I want you to hear me in saying you don't need to be an expert, you don't need a platform, and you don't need the perfect words. You just need to start and look towards your neighbor. The only advice I can say is things I'm doing now myself is continue to read, buy as much publication, and have your own personal library if you can build it out. Donate if you can, show up locally, talk to other people so we don't feel isolated, and try to emphasize on protecting the truth. Continue to reiterate the truth because it's getting lost in the mess of the media and getting lost in the mess of communication. Keep talking. Defend science when it's dismissed. Ask better questions. Stay curious and remember the humanity behind everyone and everything that you do. I'm inspired not because I feel fearless, but because I refuse to let fear turn into silence. It took me a long time to regain my voice, and now I know that the reason why I need to have a stronger stand and a stronger base to my voice is because this moment calls to it, and it calls for building community, and it calls for sounding the alarms where they need to be sounded, and to continue to share stories that I think are important, and to continue to share journeys on how to pursue opportunities in STEM so that we don't lose this information. And if we're going to live through this moment, I want to be able to say that I tried to meet it where it was, and I tried to meet it with care and courage and participation. And if this episode moves you, hopefully it moves you towards connection and towards involvement and towards remembering that none of us are meant to do this alone. Before I go, I want to offer you something that I'm trying to give myself, which is permission. Permission to not have it all figured out, permission to move slower, permission to rest without guilt, permission to feel deeply without immediately turning those feelings into output or productivity or clarity. We don't owe the world polished answers while trying to actively survive in it. Rest is not disengagement. Taking care of yourself does not mean you have to stop caring about what's happening and what you're doing for the community. This podcast will continue to talk about beauty and science and careers, and I'll do my best to bring as much joy as I can to the platform. But it will also honor the reality that we're living through in the moments that are changing us right now. I don't have all the answers, and I don't think one podcast episode is going to fix anything. I don't think one podcast episode is going to convey everything I'm trying to say. But I do believe in participation, and if you feel overwhelmed, one good place to start is to get involved locally and collectively, organizing with your neighbors and your communities and noticing these patterns and using your personal intellect and finding community and likeness. If you're listening to this and you're feeling the same heaviness, I want you to know that you're not alone. It's okay to feel conflicted. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel scared. And it's okay to still be hopeful at the same time. And it's okay to refuse to shrink yourself to make the systems more comfortable. This podcast is still talking about the beauty behind science and careers, and hopefully I can share some joy in all of that as well. But I will not pretend that the world outside doesn't exist. I'm hyper aware of what's happening in society, and I think all of us need to be more honest with ourselves about how we're feeling and how scared we are, because we are, or at least I am. Welcome back to The Glam Chemist. I'm your host, Genesis Velasquez, and today we're doing a solo episode. It's going to be a more serious one than we're probably used to. But the reality is, I'm feeling a lot, and I know that a lot of us here in the United States are also feeling the weight and the gravity of what's been happening in our society. And I would be doing myself and my listeners a disservice if I wasn't honest about how I'm feeling during this time. The truth is, it's been a lot, and pretending otherwise is worse to me than saying anything out loud. So, this episode's going to be simple. It's just going to be us talking about what I think is important and what I think is worth having a conversation when it comes to the sciences.